Hello, this is Scott Homan, the host of the Witness Underground podcast. Thanks for showing up today. Today we have a very special event that we hosted, and this is a recording between the artists that are in the film Witness Underground. I'm the director. The artists are Ryan Sutter from Ryan Sutter Music, and he started a production studio called Nuclear Gopher, which was like an isolated secular music only music community and also music production studio, Nuclear Gopher, within a cult. That's all dissolved now, but a lot of the artists got out, in part due to things that Ryan Sutter wrote. Someone in the audience asked where they can find the book. It was hugely influential on many of the artists in the Nuclear Gopher community. People are secretly reading his very honest and authentic truth-telling book called Hira Hira, and he tells in this episode where to find that book on the internet as an ebook. You can download for free. We had a really beautiful conversation. One of the guests expressing herself. It's a beautiful expression of power of music to heal and save lives. And that is the theme of this podcast and why we highlight artists who've left cults. So it's Witness Underground podcast, Artists Escaping Cults. Tagline of the film, Escaping a Cult. Witness Underground, the documentary, Escaping a Cult. She poses the question, how were these artists able to create this expansive art scene within the Jehovah's Witnesses? So Ryan explores that background. Ryan discusses the song Errands and how that has a tie to his dad making an excuse to break all the rules of the religion to have an excuse to come talk to his son, even though it's completely against the rules. A woman in the audience just left their religion and was just announced. So we discussed the meaning of what that term is in the religion, as this particular individual is struggling with the great realizations and the rabbit holes of diving into the lies and the misrepresentations of reality that the religion is so good at using to keep people under their control. And so this person's sort of having this unraveling moment of like what the world, how it really works, what the world is like, and how to navigate that process. So we all kind of get into our own experiences with that as a way to sort of assist this particular individual in this episode, which is very special. And I'm so glad that they came to watch the film and that it had this effect on all of us to kind of get to tell, start this conversation of, well, what was that moment like for us? Maybe we can help the people that are just going through it now. Being publicly shamed by the religion for some sin or breaking of a rule of some kind. We get into highlighting two of the bands. All the members are still in their religion and how kind of incredible that music is and why we love their music. The Akai and Pop Riveter. They're very talented artists. And we quote the Apostle Paul McCartney, and then Ryan live serenades us. That's a pretty fun moment. witnessunderground.com/art is where you can find most of the music that is highlighted in the film. The vast majority of it is there with links. Some of it's very well organized and little descriptions, and some of it's just like a dump of content. Like if you want to dive in, there's like 50 links there to all these artists and like 30 some albums of music. Now, one of the great resources that we get into, we just mentioned really for the sake of that individual, is recoveringfromreligion.org, a place where I found a lot of helpful information about many different religions and helpful information simply about mental health. And it's the one organization that I highlight in the film in the credits. Like if you have questions or you're going through something like this, go to recoveringfromreligion.org. We also get into atheism. It's a beautiful way to start. If you have come from a high control group where they have indoctrinated and given you ideas you have to believe or you conform to ways of thinking or worldviews, atheism is just a clean blank slate. You can add whatever you want back in. And eventually that label has no power either. But it's a useful thing. We kind of discuss like what kind of atheisms exist and how do we discuss that term within the religious framework. It's a big topic of debate and it's very contentious. But if you're not in that group, that word has basically no power. It's just like something you never think about. But we kind of discuss how atheism has affected all of us throughout our adult lives, given that this all happened for us, this unraveling and this like coming into the real world, if you will, happened so long ago, 15, 20 years ago for us. What kind of spirituality do we participate in our lives? Anyways, it's a really wonderful conversation, and I hope that you enjoy it. If you want to learn more about this film, how to watch it, go to witnessunderground.com, and there you can find this film, the link to watch it, the series, the XW Coming Out series, the podcast that you're listening to right now, Witness Underground Podcast. Season 1 is all there as YouTube videos for this channel. And also we have a podcast on all the platforms. We're on Apple, we're on Spotify, etc. So anywhere you want to listen to it, you can. And we're in the season 2. This is episode 25. So season 2, episode 5. Thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Please like, subscribe, follow. That makes a big deal for us. It really helps the channel grow. And we are so close to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, and we've had a couple hundred people subscribe in the last couple of months. It's been really cool to see such a huge growth. It means a lot. So please hit the subscribe button and enjoy the episode. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for watching the film and hanging out. We have Ryan Sutter from the film you just watched, and Chad Rhiger. Ryan Sutter of the Lavone and Nuclear Gopher fame, Chad from Ghost Army and HighTV fame, as you saw in the film. And
Daytrip.
Also Daytrip. Yeah, very important. We mentioned Daytrip.
Coolest of the cool kids.
Pretty much.
We have another chat here. Trinity says, that was really great. Thank you for the positive review.
Oh, hello.
One of the special guests we had at this screening was Annie from a band called Vaureen, Vaureen. They're an incredible band. Review of her band is beautiful. Vaureen sounds like if Sabbath joined Susie and the Banshees and Sonic Youth for an epic weekend mushroom trip. I absolutely love that review, and I find it accurate. You can find them on Spotify. She joins us actually in person with one of the artists in the film. I met Annie from the Vaureen through Chad and another member of the band that Chad fronted called Ghost Army, who's also highlighted in Witness Underground. So it's really cool to have Annie show up. So she's the other in-person voice you hear throughout the episode today, throughout the Q&A. She had a lot of things to say, a lot of contributions, and it was really lovely to have her. So check out her work on Spotify and everywhere else, the Vaureen, Vaureen. Thanks again, Annie, for coming and showing up and for giving us permission to highlight you and your music. Thoughts?
I was really moved. You know, it's a very vulnerable, intimate look into the powerful way in which music kind of saves us. Like I'm a musician. I didn't grow up in a cult religion, but there was still religion and there was still oppression in other aspects. And I think it's one of those profound truths that the act of playing, getting together with other people and playing music is more often it's more powerful than words. And like when she was saying like I would just cry while I was playing and then I would feel better, like that's such a perfect, beautiful illustration of that. And I think it's like, I just think it was cool that you guys were able to do this. I'm sure there are situations where even that would be seen as, even just playing a guitar at all would be seen as like, that's off limits.
That's time you could be devoting to getting closer to your...
Yeah, and somehow it still happened, and that's just like, that's life-saving.
We had a kind of interesting reason why we were sort of given permission a little bit in our minds. My mother was a singer, and she was in a band with her brother. She was one of 13 kids, and they used to be the brunette family singers and they did like radio programs and stuff. I've got some of the old recordings. It's really neat. And her dad was a home recordist who would record his kids doing songs and would record music with my grandma. And so it was sort of like it was already there. But when my mom, and she wasn't raised as a witness, so when she became a witness, she had to figure out how to balance that for herself. And the way she did that was she actually formed a band with her little brother, Rick, who also became a witness. And they figured out these kind of rules, and they became sort of, I don't know, one of maybe 3 Jehovah's Witness cover bands in the Twin Cities that would play everybody's wedding receptions. That was kind of their thing. Like if you were getting married and you were a witness, you were getting Cactus, Crystal, or Mountain Mist. You were getting one of those 3 bands, no matter what congregation you're in. And so we had all this gear in the basement when we were kids, and nobody had ever told us this was in any way controversial, right? It was just mom's a singer. So, but we didn't.
Wait, that was not unknown to people.
No, but she was like, we didn't know she was playing these like carefully vetted lists of songs for these events. And we were just taking the stuff and going off our own crazy creative direction from day one, because we didn't have, we didn't even know what we were doing at first. So we kind of backed into it, and I feel like we got lucky. Like, we didn't have to go fight for that permission later after having been sort of raised, we were kind of brought in by having the connection to one of the few sanctioned local witness bands.
So what was the Jackson 5 song that you fucking hated because your little brother said that you heard it over and over? Was it ABC? Was it Rockin' Robin? Which one was it?
I believe Rockin' Robin is the answer to your trivia question.
I remember from ever ago talking to Reed, like asking him questions about so your mom just like played music, like still kind of, I was the same incredulous boy, even when we were like making our own like goofy like post-rock music. Like,
I wouldn't be surprised if the fact that my mom was singing in a band held back our family in terms of like spiritual advancement in the congregation. I don't know that for a fact, but like my dad, it took him forever to become a ministerial servant. And I'm not positive it wasn't because mom was a singer, but like I said, everybody in the Twin Cities, we got to go to everybody's weddings because mom was always singing in the band. So, it also gave us access to a lot of gear, which kids don't normally have. We had drum sets and keyboards and guitars and amps and microphones, and so it was kind of cool. Like, we didn't have cable TV or the internet because it was the 80s, but we did have essentially a music room. I feel like that was pretty fortunate. We weren't rebels at all. We were just kids doing the thing, and then we never stopped.
And I remember being kind of fortunate. I think I'd asked you, like, next time you go to this studio that you talk about all the time, Nuclear Gopher, like, can I tag along? And I remember just like walking into your basement, just like everything was all set up. There's already a PA, and there's like guitars plugged into amplifiers and I had never seen like guitars plugged into pedals, plugged into amplifiers, and there was also like ready to be recorded at any given moment. I was just like,
it was a standing working studio. If you went into that room in the basement, there were microphones taped to the ceilings, there were cables running everywhere. We had this old metal desk that Rhett would call the Nuclear Gopher International Communications Center that had like a PC and like all the recording stuff. It was pretty cool, and we would just come home from school and like that's what we did. We didn't have anything else to do. It was that or go to the meetings.
We have a couple questions.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to mention before I jump into Bridget's question and Ryan's question is what you said, Annie, about the power of music to heal is something I think I knew intuitively before I started this, because I played in bands and have a deep connection to live music and performance. As I've evolved the project, that's the theme of the podcast now. The Witness Underground podcast is about the power of music to heal, or the power of creativity in general. And I think that's an insightful message to get from the film, even though it's not really stated clearly. So thanks for saying it as the first thing that said. Bridget asks, how did you decide to frame your story of Jehovah's Witnesses surrounding the indie music scene in suburban Minneapolis? It was very well done. So I really appreciate that. And I'll take a stab at it. Ryan and Chad, you guys can also jump in on that. I guess my first go at that question is, I grew up in the same area, and I knew Chad and Eric and Cindy loosely, more Eric than anyone else in the film. And because I was in a band and I moved to Minneapolis, so I ended up partying in sort of like the Jehovah's Witness version of going to college and hanging out in the dorms or like on campus or something and having college friends. That like this scene was sort of like my experience, having some version equivalency of that. And when I went to make the movie, I was already making content, and we crowdfunded together, this group. We're going to make something. And the idea was to keep the series going. But then I realized like I should work with people that I know with music that I think is great. There was like 20 people I was going to interview, and I did interview a lot of them. But when I finally shot this, I was like, this whole thing kind of stands alone on itself, and it has all this archival videos, and these people are kind of fired up to tell it and support it by giving me music and videos to go with it. So that's to answer why Minneapolis, why these people. I was close to Eric and some of the second generation nuclear gopher community, I guess, the ones that left, especially.
I'll only add that I didn't know Scott before this at all, and the interview and the video was from the first time we ever met, so that was pretty fun.
That's one of my favorite little factoids. Ryan's a fantastic individual, but his ego doesn't need the sunshine blowing up his skirt. That, like, I don't know if he cringes or secretly loves, probably a little bit of both. I have been trying to make all of our friends refer to him as the Godfather, because he's the one who wrote the blog that we all weren't supposed to read. Like, so honest. I've never been as honest as he was honest on that blog, and it was very inspiring, and I think it was inspiring to a lot of us. And yeah, I love that little factoid, the fact that you two, in spite of like knowing each other really well now, like Scott and I, when we were witnesses, like Scott would pose these ideas. I gave him a little nickname. I called Scott Speculatio, I did some sort of joke about him, like he had all these like, well, what if? No. I was very a good little witness. I was like, yo, that's speculation. That's not, that's not in bounds. And he's like, but why? Like, let's just talk about this. And I'm like, no, buddy, we just have to have decorum and propriety. And
I would love to talk about that time period.
I want to know what this nickname was whenever you remember it, Chad.
Speculatio. It's supposed to sound a little bit like fellatio, because I did wink. I was like, come on, Speculatio.
That's really funny. I have never heard that. I don't believe that was it, but let's go with it for tonight.
It was.
And then Ryan, let me know if you want to go up on screen. Ryan says, I'm curious, in your later years, have you been able to connect with family? Also, is the religion getting more lenient as time advances?
I'll go no with the first question, and I don't really know with the second question, because I don't think so. Like, no rules have been softened that have caused my family to change their stance towards me. I don't really spend a lot of time in XGW space, but every once in a while I just check, are we still shunning? Yes. Okay, cool. All right.
For the people who haven't heard, give me the 2-sentence experience you had about the last time you hung out with your old man.
Let me try and make this as short as I can. My grandmother, his mother, is in a home in hospice care. She was reaching her 95th birthday, and in order to throw her a party and get everybody, including my father, to show up, they couldn't call it her 95th birthday, and instead they had to call it her welcome back to Minnesota party. And that allowed my dad to go. And since I was there, because I've been also visiting her in the hospital, I was the DJ playing old swing music on records from the 40s. And my dad had to act like a normal person towards me for an hour. And that was great.
By pressure of all of your normal family.
He's surrounded by 60 people who are all there for his mom, and he showed up, so he had to have conversations with me and stuff for an hour. But he has had no other contact since. So, and that was a fluke.
I can answer that. Like, I don't know if it's necessarily softened. I have run into, topically, I've run into Reed a couple of times over the last, Ryan's younger brother, Reed, who was the drummer in Daytrip and whatnot. I've run into him a couple of times, and like either after a show, a very interesting kind of impromptu reunion outside of the My Bloody Valentine show, the Palace Theater, and a bunch of witnesses who, because of their Minnesota graces, they didn't shun us outright, because it would have been very awkward for everybody else around us. So, and it gave me the opportunity to basically, I got to sexually harass my old guitar player, Josh, because he got way into fitness. They told me he had nice tits. But I've run into Reed a couple of times. At the beginning, it's always good. And then there's always a point I can see in his eyes where it's just like, oh no, I'm enjoying this. This is not cool. And he just like very quickly will just kind of like about face and walk away.
That you remember my interaction with Rita at My Bloody Valentine show?
Yeah. I remember that your non-witness guitar player said, you're either going to walk up to your little brother or I'm going to make this whole fucking deal.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, I gotta go. Because you were going to give, for the record, if any of the people who totally didn't read Ryan's blog are totally not watching this recording, Ryan tried to do the Christian thing and give him space, but
you remember as a witness, it's awkward as hell when you run into somebody and like you feel shitty about shunning as much as they do. So, well, maybe not as much, but it's not a thing anybody wants to do. So, I didn't want to put Reed in an awkward spot, but a really good thing came out of it, because when my buddy Michael made me talk to my brother, we actually wound up seeing each other one more time after that. The little red car that I'm driving in the movie where War is Over thing is playing, that's a little late 60s Triumph Spitfire. And Reed had a late 60s Triumph GT6 back in high school, and he still had the transmission for the car lying around. And I told him I had a Spitfire, and he said, oh, you can have this transmission. And he wound up coming over to my house and giving me a transmission. And we talked for a bit, and I let him drive my car around the neighborhood. I don't know if that indicates
the most middle American thing I've ever heard.
yeah, absolutely.
This is the most what you've ever heard?
Middle America. Like, well, we're not talking to each other for decades, but I do have a transmission, and I feel like that would be a form of love to give it to you.
Well, it's
not allowed to give you verbal love or time love.
To tie it back to the music on
Always.
Louder, Longer, Lobster, there's a song called Errands, and the whole song is about my dad using errands as an excuse to come by my house. Be like, oh, well, I had this extra couch I needed to get rid of, so I brought it over.
So I don't know if it came through, but Annie was like, do you have a moment to speak briefly about transmission parts? It was like it was absolutely good.
I'm just here to share the Triumph catalog with you. If you have a moment.
Still related.
Also,
topic. Always, yes.
Also, Ryan, you have 11 more nieces and nephews, and all of these the uncles and aunts have merged with the infinite.
That goes back to Ryan's question. Do we have family connection? And the answer is resounding no, unfortunately, apart for transmission experience.
Except for bizarre random scenarios. I gotta say, Trinity, I can imagine things are really rough for you, and I'm sorry. And thank you for being here.
Can I ask Trinity, like, what quote just announced means now? Because like when Ryan left, there was like a differentiation between disfellowship, and when I left, they like kind of neutered. They took that voice away from us, so you couldn't even when we were announced, it wasn't like a Chad Rhiger has been disfellowshipped, or they just say is no longer a Jehovah's Witness. And so it's like, did he remove himself? Like when I was leaving, that was kind of a consideration. Do you want to go out like deuces, like has disassociated himself as a member of the Jehovah's Witnesses, which is a way of saying like, I love you all, but I say this to the Watchtower.
I would like to be able to do that, because I still need to go ahead and I'm going to do it finally, I think. Write the letter, but I would like to send a middle finger as a photograph instead of, I no longer want to be a part of your cult. Please take my name off your list.
Wouldn't it be nice if you could do your own announcement? I would love to have a finger gun like that. Yeah, that would be awesome.
Go to every congregation you could possibly enter and then say it from the stage. I'm not a Jehovah's Witness.
I would say I renounce the Holy Spirit.
Yeah,
I would think that would be I mean, I was in the audience the one time I was publicly reproved, and it was a pretty shitty experience.
Was it sort of like Eric describes in the film?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Can you tell us what was the awkward topic that they gave a talk on just before that announcement?
I think I was too busy dying inside to worry about it, but I mean, I had sex with my girlfriend, so at some point they must have talked about fornication. I just know it was terrible when you're sitting there and they announce this, and then everybody comes up afterwards and is all like, I wonder what he did. And they didn't announce her in her congregation, so because she was private and I was public, so which it still confuses me. But I got to live with that bizarre no privileges, can't comment at the meeting, can't say prayers anymore. Everybody wonders what you did that was terrible for like a couple, year and a half before people started to act normal again. It's not as bad as just fellowshipping though.
So Trinity mentions, I'm just going to read it. As someone who's just announced a couple of weeks ago, I can say they have not softened. The religion hasn't softened on this topic, except technically the elders' books, this family can stay in touch, but this it's still frowned upon, so they kind of don't do it. Ryan, you left in 2004, correct?
Officially 2005.
And then Chad was like 2008 or 9 or something, and I was 2008.
I voted for Obama.
That was my first vote.
I was kind of like putting bows on things. I attempted the fade. The kid was born in 2007. Yeah, worst 6 months of my life. 2008. There we go.
Trinity, if you had more to say, like Chad's interested, I'm interested. It's like, so we've been out a really long time. Me, 15 years. Chad about the same. Ryan a little bit longer.
Yeah, and Russell was in charge when I left. Yeah.
Couple of years, not a century more. But if you had more to say, like it's interesting because we made this film so long ago, and this experience for us is so long ago. But for someone who's fresh out, like I have no idea how someone would take the experience of watching this film if you just like change the way you think, or I mean, obviously, just being announced doesn't mean you just left the religion, but it's very raw, fresh wound. So anyway, regardless of whether you comment again, awesome that you're here. And it's like gets better. It's like the best decision.
It does get better. I gotta say, I got no regrets. Some of these times we've chatted, people will ask, like how, I don't know how much this is still a part of your life. And other than like these movie showings, talking with people like this, the answer is like not at all. I don't worry about not being a witness any more than I worry about, I don't know, not having hair. It's just a ship that sailed a long time ago, and it's not part of my life really. But
you know what? I honestly think you bring up more frustrated resentments about their thing than I do about the Jehovah's Witness.
Oh, if I had to change one thing, I would regrow something up here and look a little less Patrick Stewart. I mean, come on.
Engage.
But no, but seriously,
people don't do so well.
You move on. You get a life. I think it's super important to get a life of your own and figure out what you do believe more than what you're reacting against.
A good friend of mine a couple of screenings ago, he's known me for like 12 years, and he saw the movie, and he's so sick and tired of hearing me like talk about my upbringing. And he has a couple other friends, like he's friends with the HighTV crew, and so like he's heard us all kind of whine about how much the Watchtower sucks. And then he watched this movie within the last couple of months, and he was all fired up. He was like, There's MIA POWs, man. Like, you need to go back and get them. I'm like, they have to do it themselves. But I was really happy that like the movie kind of fired him. He'd never grown up as didn't have any experience as a witness, and he was still kind of fired up. Like, you need to go back and get fools. And I'm like, they need to go through that shit themselves.
Well, one thing I wanted to say, and it's from a quote, I'm going to try to remember it. It's from you, Ryan. I don't remember exactly how you stated it, but it's basically control is the enemy of love. Like if you are, you talked about fear, you framed it in fear. Fear is a result of control and an imbalance and misuse of power. I mean, it's a beautiful takeaway. And for anybody who's like starting a new chapter in a whole new world with a new framework and building their own understanding, like that's the thing to remember. Control and fear are the opposite of love.
I believe that strongly, so I'm glad you brought that up.
It is interesting how much you're basically quoting, whatever passage that Paul wrote about like what love is. Paul McCartney, yes. Yes, the Apostle Paul McCartney.
Come on, give your heart to somebody.
No, it's good. It's good. No, but I mean, it's interesting. I was thinking about this this time watching it through, and like Ryan, I've seen this movie dozens and dozens and dozens of times. But like you're basically quoting one of the most relevant scriptures that I've ever read that talks about love, what it is and what it isn't, and I think that's a bold statement. But yeah, like. How can you love when the fear is in the way of that?
It's not Paul, but my brother Reed has a song on the Pop Riveter record that would be the first
thing about love and how you shout
love, but you don't know love if you don't show love. Could read it 10 times and never
get it.
And then the sun shines so bright, I'll never get it. I know, and I'm just like, every time I hear
so
that song,
good.
I'm like, oh, dude, you know,
Right.
come on.
You are right, but also, I'm still here, fucker. Anyway.
Yeah. I love my little brother. I really do. I love him very much. And I love his music. He's a talented, super friggin' talented.
That album blew my mind. Of everything that came out of the Witness world, that Pop Riveter album, I was so impressed by. I listened to it all the time.
I still listen to it all the time. It's one of my top 10 favorite records. I love it. And I
wish I could promote the hell out of it, because actually when I first cut the film, the very first thing highlighted the shit out of Pop Riveter, and I had to change it on the first watch with everyone in the movie. Ryan's like, okay, I don't know how to break this to you, but like the middle, like 20 minutes of the film basically like puts my brother on a pedestal and his music, and I love it, but he'll never agree to allow it in here. And it's not part of the Nuclear Gopher thing. It's post-Nuclear Gopher. It's Band Kids Unite stuff that is, they will all hate that it's in the film, and you could be litigated. So I had to like recut everything, which ended up being great, because then I fell in love with Daytrip. I already was in love with Daytrip, but I was like, well, I have to highlight a band. What band am I going to highlight? So I had a Daytrip in a way that I felt really good about. But I had this whole like 15-minute cut I had to replace, because I love Pop Riveter. Anyway,
the two Akai records are really good too.
Yeah.
Although there's too much of them that are about me directly that I don't like to listen to those very much. But Reed's the last song that I know of that Reed recorded is on the second Akai record. I think it's the last song, and it makes me cry every time I hear it. It's just phenomenal. So.
And their production quality like just went so high. I mean, I think a lot of that was Eric too being involved. Even
it was a
when
combination of Eric and attainable recording technology. I mean, remember in the late 90s, early 2000s, the technology available to do high quality audio production at like home levels was much, much harder to get than today. Like today, 20 years later, you can do this stuff much, much higher quality. So
on an iPad.
Yeah. And I'm not degrading Eric's talent or anybody else's. They have phenomenal talent, and you have to have that talent to put it to use. I'm just saying, like, I'm actually jealous of the technology that they've got available, because like, we were so constrained by like tapes and limits and stuff we could not have ever afforded in the 90s. Like, it's a beautiful world to be in right now. I think everybody should be making music.
I will say, in the interest of goodwill, and also fantastic art, the Akai's record, Pretty Songs About Ugly Things, it's probably Eric's opus. It's his production opus. It's Ryan's younger sister Robbie and her husband Hiromi came to Eric with basically like, guy girl harmony, back and forth call and response acoustic songs, and he built it into this like just glorious opus. And I wish we could put a lot more of it into this stuff, but they would probably be pissed about it.
I mean, it'd be
But
kind of
God
fun to
bless.
do it as a podcast. Like, hey, we discovered this record. Let's talk about what we know about
Yeah, it's also, oh my God, one of the last road trips that Eric and I took, like, we'll do that if we go on like a long road trip, which is like one of us will just kind of look wryly at the other and like, all right, this is musical masturbation, but let's play one of our records. All right.
it.
And just talk about like how good it was. Stop at every bar on the way.
There's a couple more people in the chat. I just want to get to them. I think we'll wrap it up after these, unless anybody else has anything to say. Oh wow, Trinity wrote quite a bit. Okay, from Bridget, Ryan's leaving the Witness blog. Is it still online if we'd like to read it, Ryan?
It's not online in the format of a blog, but pretty much every post in the entire blog, plus kind of footnotes and explanatory comments, I put it all together in a freely downloadable ebook. It's on archive.org. If you search for Hira Hira, you'll find it. It has been downloaded as of right now.
Is it in its entirety?
It is every post from my blog from back in the day. Yeah. And like I said, I wrote a bunch of footnotes and additional descriptive stuff. So it's been downloaded 1,500 times or so.
Oh, wow.
So, I'll put it in the chat. I thought about reposting it back onto my ryansutter.net blog as back posts, which is what it used to be. There's a little bit of a story involving my little brother for why it's no longer on there. Every post that was on that blog is in there.
You gotta leave some things to the imagination.
If you'd like to hear your current music projects and Cindy's, where's the best place to find those? I have a spot for some of it, but I think it's going to be in a new place, and Ryan has other places for some of the music. But right now, if you go to witnessunderground.com/art, there are links to a lot of things, a lot of Bandcamp links, and some Spotify links to all the artists. Like there's a lot there.
Nucleargopher.com is coming back.
Ryan, could you go into Trinity's posts real quick?
Yeah. So Trinity, it's tough to know what to say. I mean, it sounds like you're pretty early in peeling back, unaware of the skeletons, and then you were getting treated badly when you didn't actually do anything worth the effing. I wish I could know what to say. I've heard a lot of people have very similar experiences, and a lot of people that I know, including myself, did not set out to leave the religion. We just found ourselves tumbling. That sounds a little bit of like what's happened with you, and I don't know what to say other than I'm sorry. There's some really good resources available online. I know when it's really fresh and it's really raw, and you start to discover all the stuff that has been kept from you, that's going to keep you real busy for a while. There's a lot. I wish there wasn't more. I mean, sometimes people have like criticized this movie a little bit because it doesn't dig into all that stuff, but that's because there's so much available material that does. And finding the skeletons in the Watchtower closet is like the simplest thing you can possibly do. And you kind of need to do it for yourself. And then also, I noticed Scott just posted recovering from religion.org. After you get through the part where you have to pick at all the scabs and blow everything apart, I feel like most people that I have seen go through this process, and I'm speaking for Chad as well, you go through a sort of teardown and rebuild of a lot of your brain. A friend of ours who was very active in the music scene and everything else as well, he went through this, and he described it to me as a Cartesian brain dump. He had to like start from I think therefore I am and rebuild everything. It's time consuming. I noticed you're saying you're seeing a therapist. Good. Most of us have. It's helpful.
I fully agree with what Ryan said. When I left, it's still the most traumatic 6 months of my life. And I remember when I finally had the courage to tell my wife, she knew something was up because I was finding excuses to never go to the meetings. The time that she saw me, I was just like literally just bedridden in darkened rooms, just fucking depressed. And when she wasn't around. I was digging through the Watchtower CD-ROM, like trying to put it all back together. And she asked, what was it? And I was like, I cannot be responsible for you losing your relationship with Jehovah. Like, I was not ready to be responsible for that. My baby mama, rad person. We're no longer together, but I still have nothing but respect for her. She's a librarian, and I knew the one thing that I could say without to kind of put her on her own journey was basically exactly what Ryan says. Look up the references. Look up the references. Any reference that's ever cited in any Watchtower or any publication, look them up. Because as the movie points out, it's not that they were wrong, it's that they fucking lie their asses off. Like the amount of intellectual dishonesty that it takes, that's a thread that just keeps unraveling everything. And so like that's been my kind of like ethical disclaimer to myself. If somebody is like, well, what is it? What is it? I'm like, just look up the references. And if you have love for truth in your heart, you're going to see the bullshit. And then it's just going to unravel. And it's not going to be fun. It's not fun. I wanted it to be, I wanted to put it all back together. But
another really safe thing you can do that's not really against their rules. And I mean, Trinity, if you're out already, or whoever's watching this, if you're going through anything like this, the recoveringfromreligion.org website I love because it has this references list that's like, for this religion, here's like 14 links and YouTube channels, and for this religion there's 3, and for this idea there's 20, and for this, and it just goes on and on. And none of that stuff has anything to do with Jehovah's Witnesses, but it's a lot of the same structure for those different faith groups. And so you can give yourself the freedom to read that stuff. There's a whole category for Jehovah's Witnesses, but if that bothers you or anyone who's watching this, that website is just a great resource, and it's secular, non-religious, and that's the other thing I really like about it. And as far as like reformatting your brain, like starting with I think therefore I am, my story is in the film in a sense in that it's sort of autobiographical. I'm not in it. I only say a couple lines in it as questions or responses to Ryan. My story is very similar in a similar path, and I read the references. That was my whole thing as a witness. I read any scientists they ever quoted, and it wasn't just read their quote, it was read their whole book. And I would talk to elders after they quoted the same author. You quoted this scientist. Did you ever read what he had to say? No, I just pulled that from the Watchtower. Oh, because he doesn't actually believe what you said. That quote wasn't like correct. He's like, oh, you're not supposed to read anything outside of the Watchtower. Well, you just quoted the guy. Like, I feel like that's enough reason alone, And I was doing that for years before I like sort of had a clean slate. When I finally left, I was like, oh, in the congregation meeting, like, fuck, I'm an atheist. God damn it. And then had to like look around at all these other cult members, realizing for the first time that that's what they are, and then left the room in the middle of the meeting. Like, I don't want to be in a room filled with people like this, even though I had done that thousands of times. Being an atheist or identifying in that way at the beginning was really good because it was clean. It was like, okay, all of it's bullshit, not just this religion and this God, but like all the religions and all the gods, all the spirituality, which is not what I think now. I have added things back over the years.
The people I know who have gotten out of other cult religions, exact same. Atheist at the start.
As the credits rolled, I went to go grab us a couple glasses of water, and he goes, so does that basically preclude any spirituality? And without missing a beat, I'm like, we're all atheists. I have come around. I'm an agnostic, but I'm a post-militant atheist agnostic, which means, baby, I don't fucking care. It's cool. Like, you got the Wayne Coyne, like, who knows? Maybe there isn't a vein of stars calling out my name. But, like, if there is to you, fuck, I don't care. It's fine.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, I just don't want to have the argument. But I will say this. I think the philosophical arguments about is there a God or isn't there a God are, for me, of zero value. They don't have any content in them. But if you name the specific God you're talking about,
yeah,
I can tell you whether or not I believe in that one. And for most people, if you say Thor, unless they're such a Marvel fan that they actually think Chris Hemsworth is really him, the answer is going to be no. I'm that way with Jehovah.
Yes.
Because,
I just go one God further than you.
yeah. And I can't say there's no concept of a God. That's strong atheism. I can say that this is a literary character, and my reasons are because he was a member of a pantheon before they even wrote these books. And there's 40 other gods in that pantheon I don't believe in, so why would I believe in the 41st one? Because the Babylonian pantheon, Reshef and Deber and Dagon and all these other gods, they're in the Bible, right? Hanging out with Yahweh, and I don't believe in them. So, that's where I come down as atheist. If you can name the God, I can tell you if I believe in that God. I can't tell you.
I'm a Neil Gaiman atheist in that, I basically believe in all of the gods we've invented. We called them into existence. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, there's another way to go. Maybe that's it. Maybe as soon as we invent them, they're real. I don't know. Literary characters are very powerful.
I think that's a great place to stop unless anyone has any follow-up.
We hijacked the conversation long before, but thank you very much for giving
Trinity,
us
you just be well. Just be well.
And also,
Trinity, thank you for commenting and participating and driving the conversation forward. It was great.
Trinity, please feel free to reach out to Scott. I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but I'm more than happy to talk to you about my experience. I remember when that was very new and difficult. That's tough. It's not an experience that I would ever change. It forever influences who I am, but it's also one of the most difficult experiences of my life. And I would be more than happy to, bullshit with you. I had a couple of friends who come up to me and they're like, how do you know? I've had my doubts, but how do you know? And in the past, I've gone turbo apostate, I want to destroy your faith in Jesus.
Send them running back in.
I've reined, and they get all scared. I've reined back quite a bit. I just want what's gonna make you happy, and as long as you're using your critical thinking. I have several friends who are still in, and I barely hear from them. I hear percolations still in name, they just kind of are doing the very slow fade, and that's fine. I respect it all.
I'm also willing to be pinged about stuff. You can find me on most of the social stuff. I don't hide out very well. I mean, my domain is Ryan@ryansutter.net. It's not like I'm really anonymous. So,
You're so obscurant, Ryan. Jesus.
All right. Well, this has been lovely, everybody.
Yeah.
I'm gonna.
If you're looking, okay,
go ahead.
I'll wrap it. If you're looking for a community, we have the Patreon, so patreon.com/Witness Underground. And that's where you can support this film and the series. And there's a whole season 2 of the Witness or the XJW coming out series. And a lot of all the podcast goes on there and blog articles, all kinds of stuff. And that's just ramping up the film as the film is releasing. That's a place to connect with others as well. And if you ever join it at any level, you're in the family forever kind of thing.
Absolutely.
But there's a lot of great places to find other community, just like the Reddit EXJW subreddit XJW is really good for finding just venting whatever you want to say. It's a good spot, good resource.
Anybody who wants to process anything or just bounce shit off of me, just reach out to me through Scott. I'm more than willing to open myself up to that.
I read every post and every email that comes through the website, witnessunderground.com. So that's a great place to connect. If you want me to put you in touch with somebody in the movie, I can make that happen since Chad is offering that. If you want to find Ryan, you can go to his website. No, and I'm sure everyone's open-minded. But thanks again for everyone for coming, and thanks guys for
Thank
and
you.
Annie, everyone who's here for watching and participating. Really appreciate it.
All right.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Take care. Agape, bitches.
Thank you so much for coming to watch this episode of the Witness Underground podcast. Check out witnessunderground.com to find more information, videos like this. Find the actual podcasts, stream it on whatever audio listening platform you like or app. Participate in the grant if you're interested and you're an artist, want to make something, go apply for the grant. And we, as artists in this film community and this project Witness Underground, we will review your submission and we will grant you the money as soon as the film is released to the public. So that's still an ongoing process. If you want to help out and make things faster, reach out to me. There's a lot of things I need help with. If you're a show and if you're interested in having anyone in our film on your show, we are focused on that right now, getting on the podcasts. Please reach out. You can reach me at, the email is xjwdoc, so xjwdoc for X Jehovah's Witness documentary, xjwdoc@gmail.com. Witnessunderground.com is where you can find all the information for this show. Thank you so much for being here and listening, and please share it with someone you think would be interested in to watching the film or listening to the podcast. I really appreciate your time. See you on the next one.